For centuries, the Galactic Alliance had existed without challenge. Their towering cities, glittering in the vacuum of space, were symbols of unshakable power. The leaders, wise and ancient, presided over a network of thousands of species, all bound by the rules of mutual respect and order. The Alliance had long regarded the human race as little more than a curiosity, isolated on a backwater world called Earth, clinging to its primitive past, while the galaxy marched on in the great dance of progress. No one had expected anything different, but on a seemingly ordinary day that all changed. At first, the anomaly was small, an unmarked ship entering an uncharted sector, without a single trace of recognition in the Alliance's vast sensor networks. The Galactic Command brushed it off as another blip in the endless flow of cosmic data. No one was prepared for what happened next. The human fleet didn't simply appear on the edge of the known galaxy. It materialized right on top of the most heavily guarded region of Alliance space, a sector known for its hyperspace anomalies. The ship's arrival wasn't graceful or subtle. It was as though the laws of space itself had been bent by some unseen force. A flash of white light, followed by the massive, sudden presence of dozens, no, hundreds, of sleek, angular ships filled the void. They were silent at first, hanging motionless in the emptiness of space, the dark backdrop of distant stars serving as a contrast to their ominous appearance. They didn't broadcast their identity or ask for permission to enter. They simply arrived. The Galactic Council was immediately alerted. Leaders and generals from all across the Alliance convened, their faces filled with concern, even fear, as they analyzed the strange vessels. The technology was unfamiliar, sleek, almost organic in its design, pulsating with energy in ways that defied current understanding. The ship's hulls were dark, a matte black sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, as if they were part of the very fabric of space itself. A series of alarms echoed throughout the command center as the fleet deployed. Hundreds of ships, each capable of deploying ground forces at a moment's notice, surrounded a key Alliance relay station. The station was a hub of communication for the entire region, a strategic asset that the Alliance could not afford to lose. Moments later, a signal came through, a single transmission, incomprehensibly direct. "We are humanity. You've forgotten us, but we will never forget you." The message was simple, unsettling. There was no rhetoric, no demands, just that cold, unfathomable statement. Before anyone could respond, the humans took action. With no warning, the relay station went dark, its systems frozen, as though some invisible hand had cut the cables of communication. Then, the most chilling part, no weapons were fired. No explosions rocked the station. The silence was deafening. It was then that the realization hit. Whoever these humans were, they weren't just a passing anomaly. They weren't some backwater species that could be ignored. They were calculated, deliberate. They had power far beyond what the galaxy had assumed. Alliance fleets mobilized immediately, ships rushing to defend their borders, their infrastructure, their way of life. The initial reaction was one of disbelief. No one had expected this. The message had been received, but it was not the words that haunted the minds of those watching across the galaxy. It was the cold certainty of those words. Humanity was not asking for permission. They were not merely arriving. They were laying claim. And as the Alliance scrambled to react, one thing became clear. The galaxy had underestimated the human race. And now, for the first time in history, they were about to find out what happens when humanity decides it will no longer be ignored. The moment the human fleet made its presence known, the galaxy's advanced species were thrust into a panic that no one had anticipated. The Galactic Alliance, an empire built on centuries of dominance and diplomacy, found itself scrambling for answers, uncertain of how to deal with a race that had appeared from nowhere with such overwhelming confidence. Every warship, every fortress, every sensor array in the sector had failed to detect their arrival. Now, the Alliance's intelligence network was racing to catch up, but no one seemed able to provide a clear explanation of who these humans were or what they wanted. The sudden disappearance of the communications relay station only deepened the mystery. No one had seen the method of attack, and there was no trace left of how the humans disabled it. The systems were locked down as if by some invisible force. No hacks, no explosions, just dead silence. In the wake of the incident, panic spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. The leaders of the Alliance convened again, this time in a higher-stakes emergency session. Their greatest minds, scientists, military strategists, diplomats, poured over every shred of information, but there was nothing. The humans had not made any formal demands. They hadn't even attacked. Yet every race that encountered them found themselves in awe, if not terror, of the human fleet's tactics and technological prowess. How can they move through space like that? Their ships defy every known law of physics, whispered an Xanthosian general, her voice shaking with unease. The Xanthosians were known across the galaxy for their own advanced fleet and intricate understanding of space-time mechanics, yet even they couldn't fathom how the humans had arrived so effortlessly in a sector that was heavily monitored by hyperspace detectors. Other species were no less bewildered. The Aethar, an ancient race who claimed to have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, found themselves standing in stunned silence, the knowledge they had gathered over millennia failing to explain this new threat. "This is not normal," one of their council leaders muttered, looking at the projections of the human fleet. "These humans are not bound by the same rules. They are unpredictable." As each new transmission came from the human ships, each more cryptic than the last, the unease grew. The humans spoke little. The few words they broadcasted were often chilling, devoid of any diplomacy. "We are not here to negotiate. We are not here for your power. We are here because we remember what you did." These messages were never followed by elaboration, leaving the galaxy to imagine what terrible history these humans referred to. But one thing became clear: this was not an enemy driven by hunger for resources or domination. A series of brief encounters with human warships only added to the horror. These humans didn't rely on the overwhelming firepower of larger fleets. They fought differently. During an isolated skirmish, a single human ship disabled an entire fleet of the Kareth, using nothing more than a concentrated beam that scrambled their weapons and left them powerless without a single shot fired. The Kareth had long been considered one of the fiercest races in the galaxy, yet they were brought to their knees by something so simple, so clean, that they were left questioning everything they knew about war. "What are they?" was the question echoing across every race's halls of power. But no one knew. The galaxy's collective panic only grew as another startling revelation surfaced. The humans had not only mastered technology, but also employed tactics that defied conventional military thought. One of the largest Alliance ships, a colossal dreadnought, was spotted encountering the humans in the Outer Rim. The battle should have been a slaughter in the humans' favor, but the humans didn't fight with brute force. Instead, they played an elegant game of cat and mouse, drawing the massive dreadnought into a trap using a false signature on their sensors, only to ambush it in the blind spots of its defensive grid. The battle ended in an unprecedented retreat for the Alliance ship, its crew shaken and its reputation damaged. A single human warship had turned the tide, using nothing more than the element of surprise and an understanding of war that seemed decades, if not centuries, ahead of its time. "Whatever they are, we are not ready for them," whispered a former military strategist of the Nezra, his voice trembling with the realization that no one had anticipated this. Humanity was not just another race to be swept aside. They had arrived with a force that the galaxy had no frame of reference for. In the face of this terrifying unknown, the galaxy stood on the brink of its greatest fear, an enemy unlike any it had ever faced before. And it was clear now, more than ever, that humanity, though small and young by galactic standards, wasn't just here to survive. They were here to change the galaxy, and no one could predict what would happen next. For weeks, the galaxy simmered with anxiety. The unexpected arrival of humanity's fleet had already shaken the established power structures, but it wasn't until the humans decided to showcase their true strength that the true weight of the threat became undeniable. The human ships, sleek and formidable, had remained silent for most of their presence, making calculated moves that bewildered their enemies but revealed nothing of their ultimate power. That all changed when the humans made their next move. An exhibition of force, not against a single species, but against a neutral zone, a place where no one expected a confrontation. A remote mining colony in the Outer Rim, far from Alliance-controlled space, was about to become the stage for the humans' most dangerous demonstration. At first, the colony's government received a standard communication request. It was an innocuous, polite message. Too polite, some would later say. The humans wanted to send a delegation for peace talks. But the message was sent on a tight schedule, and the government hesitated. They were unsure whether they were dealing with a diplomatic outreach or something far darker. The neutrality of the zone meant that neither the Alliance nor any other empire had jurisdiction to stop the humans. In the end, they agreed. What followed was a brutal and terrifying demonstration of human resolve. The humans arrived with a full fleet, 3 warships, each massive, but all slightly different in their design. They didn't deploy ground troops, nor did they make any formal gestures of aggression. Instead, they simply entered orbit around the colony's largest mining platform. Without warning, the human ships activated their primary weapons, energy beams of unfathomable precision. The beams didn't tear the station apart with the explosive force of traditional weapons. They cut with surgical precision, severing key systems in the station's infrastructure, communication relays, power conduits, and defensive shields. The colony's defensive fleet attempted to respond, but the human ships moved faster than anything they had encountered. With pinpoint accuracy, the humans disabled each ship without firing a single lethal shot. They sent a pulse that shut down the weapon systems of an entire fleet, rendering them helpless in space. No explosions, no torrents of fire, just total, unnerving silence. It wasn't just a show of power. It was a masterclass in precision and control. The colonists were left watching in horror, realizing they had no ability to retaliate, no plan for such an overwhelming demonstration of skill. The humans did not destroy the colony, nor did they harm any civilians. But they had demonstrated something far worse, an unshakable dominance over technology itself. Once the demonstration was over, the humans broadcast their message across the galaxy. This is how we fight. This is how we win. The galaxy went silent. The implications were vast. The humans didn't need massive armies, vast fleets, or unimaginable firepower to hold entire star systems hostage. They didn't need to annihilate their enemies. They simply needed to cripple them. They had demonstrated that they could paralyze entire sectors of space without a single casualty. The message was clear. Resistance would be futile. And worse yet, no one knew how they were doing it. Alliance commanders scrambled to piece together the puzzle, desperately trying to understand the methods behind the humans' devastating display. But every attempt to reverse engineer the technology failed. The humans' weapon systems weren't just advanced, they were unique, defying every known law of physics and space-time manipulation. The fear, which had initially been based on the unknown, now had a face. The galaxy's greatest powers had encountered a species whose understanding of warfare was not based on overwhelming might, but on finesse, precision, and a terrifying ability to manipulate technology with surgical precision. And then, just as abruptly as it had started, the humans left. They didn't announce their departure or issue a threat. They simply vanished, as quietly as they had arrived. Their ships disappeared into the blackness of space, leaving behind a trail of fear and uncertainty. The galaxy, once confident in its superiority, was left to confront a new and terrifying reality. Humanity was no longer just a species to be ignored. They were a force, and that force had just shown the galaxy a glimpse of what it could do. and no one knew how to stop it. In the wake of the human fleet's unsettling demonstration of power, panic swept through the galaxy. The Galactic Alliance had long been the supreme authority in the cosmos, and yet they now faced a threat that seemed to ignore all the rules they had established over millennia. The humans had proven that they were not only capable of overwhelming force, but also surgical precision, able to strike at the very heart of the Alliance without lifting a finger in traditional combat. It was clear that the time for diplomacy had passed. The galaxy could no longer afford to wait and wonder what the humans would do next. They had to strike first, before humanity could gain any more of a foothold. And so, the Alliance moved swiftly. A coalition of the most powerful races in the galaxy, unified for the first time in centuries, prepared for an offensive that would finally rid the galaxy of this mysterious new threat. Admiral Theric, a seasoned leader from the Andrasian Dominion, was put in charge of the fleet tasked with confronting humanity. His was a fleet of unparalleled might. Hundreds of battleships, destroyers, and support vessels, all armed with the most advanced weapons the galaxy had to offer. He had studied the humans' recent tactics carefully, and his plan was simple: overwhelm them with sheer force. He believed the human show of power was nothing more than a trick, a diversion to make the galaxy cower before them. As the massive armada entered human-controlled space, the human ships were nowhere to be seen. The Alliance fleet maintained a tight formation, ready for any assault. For hours, there was nothing but silence. No transmissions from the humans, no signs of activity. The tension was unbearable. Were they preparing a trap? Or had the humans simply disappeared into the shadows of space? Admiral Theric gave the order to advance deeper into the sector, hoping to flush out the humans from their hiding places. It was then that the trap was sprung. Without warning, the human ships emerged from seemingly nowhere, their sleek hulls cutting through the darkness like phantoms. The Alliance ships tried to lock onto them with their weapon systems, but the humans were already moving, faster than any of their sensors could track. In seconds, the first wave of human warships disabled half the forward assault fleet, using pinpoint strikes that targeted the weakest points of each ship's defensive grid. Energy shields flickered and failed as the human ships danced through the enemy fire, their movements fluid and almost predatory. "Report," Theric bellowed as his flagship shook violently. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the reports were grim. Power systems were failing, weapons were offline, and the communication grid was in disarray. The humans had crippled their fleet with ease. The rest of the Alliance forces attempted to regroup and retaliate, but they were outmatched at every turn. The human warships didn't need to destroy the entire fleet. They systematically disabled each ship's ability to fight. A single human vessel swooped in and out of the battle, evading fire, cutting through the chaos, and disabling engines with deadly precision. "Admiral, we can't fight back. They're too fast," one of Theric's officers cried out, panic seeping into her voice. Theric's teeth ground together. He had been certain this would be their victory, but the humans had defied every expectation. The battle was chaos. There were no tactics, no lines of defense, only a constant onslaught of disorienting, targeted strikes that rendered the Alliance fleet useless. It felt as though the humans were everywhere at once, and yet nowhere at all. Despite their superior numbers, the Alliance fleet was forced into a retreat. As the remaining ships limped away, the human fleet did not pursue. They simply watched, their ships hanging in the void, waiting as the Alliance forces fled. Once again, the humans had not destroyed the fleet. They had crippled it. They had outsmarted it, and in doing so, they had crushed the Alliance's confidence. Theric, standing at the bridge of his shattered flagship, had no words. The human fleet had proven a point, and the galaxy was left reeling from the realization that it could not win through sheer might alone. This was no longer a simple conflict. This was a war of the mind, a contest of strategies and tactics where brute force alone would never prevail. The news of the defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire, causing an uneasy silence to fall over the galactic powers. The Alliance had tried to strike back, but they had failed spectacularly. Humanity's message was clearer than ever. They were not just another race to be crushed. They were something entirely different. And the galaxy was running out of time to figure out what that meant. In the aftermath of their crushing defeat, the Galactic Alliance had no choice but to rethink everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human fleet had proven that brute force alone was not enough to overcome them. The battle for the future of the galaxy had changed from one of traditional conflict to something far more insidious, an intellectual and technological struggle where humanity's power lay in their ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast their opponents. But for all their fear, the galaxy was not yet ready to concede. If the humans had taught them anything, it was that unity was now their only hope. Despite the division and rivalry that had defined the galaxy's power structure for millennia, the threat posed by humanity had forced old enemies to the table. The Council of the United Galaxies was formed, a coalition of the greatest powers, from the Aethar to the Kareth, from the Tenthosians to the Andrasian Dominion. It was a desperate move, one born of necessity rather than trust. Admiral Theric, now relegated to the role of a military advisor, stood at the head of a vast war room in one of the most secure Alliance bases. The room buzzed with activity as representatives from the various races argued over their next move. The most pressing issue was humanity's continued silence. They had not attacked since the last battle. They had not made any further demands. In fact, they seemed content to simply watch. "What do they want from us?" one of the Kareth commanders growled. "They've already demonstrated their power. Are they trying to wear us down by making us wait for a confrontation? Or are they just waiting for us to destroy ourselves?" "That's what I fear," said an Aether strategist. His race had watched countless civilizations rise and fall, but none had ever displayed the kind of patience and ruthlessness the humans had. "They aren't in a hurry. They'll let us destroy each other first, then pick up the pieces." The discussions were heated. No race had ever faced an enemy so elusive, so unyielding in its nature. Humanity was not acting like any aggressor they had ever encountered. They were calculating, patient, perhaps even more dangerous because of it. The galaxies were united in fear, but they were still unsure how to deal with a species that didn't play by the established rules of war. Yet there was no turning back now. A unified front was formed, and the newly combined fleets, equipped with the best technologies each race could offer, were prepared for one final confrontation. The Alliance had no choice but to move forward and face humanity head-on. They were still reeling from their failures, but this would be their last stand. Failure would mean the collapse of their entire way of life. A plan was devised. They would lure the human fleet into an engagement on neutral ground, using decoys and false signals to create a false sense of vulnerability. The goal was to overwhelm the humans' superior speed and precision with sheer numbers. It was a risky strategy, one that relied on coordination between dozens of species, each with their own agendas and tactics. But it was their best chance. As the fleets assembled, the question lingered in every mind. Would it be enough? Humanity had proved itself a master of unpredictable warfare. Now, it was the galaxy's turn to adapt. But the feeling of uncertainty was heavy in the air. Would the humans fall into their trap? Or would they reveal a new layer of strategy that none of the galactic powers could have anticipated? The clock was ticking. The human fleet had remained silent for weeks. In that silence, the galaxy's forces had trained, prepared, and united. They were ready, but deep in the hearts of many, a question lingered. Was it too late to stop the humans, or had the galaxy already lost before the final battle had even begun? The battle for the future of the galaxy was set in motion. The united fleet of the Galactic Alliance, a coalition forged in desperation, had amassed at the edge of neutral space. Every race, every faction, had set aside old grudges for the sake of survival. It was their last hope. If the humans could be defeated, even just forced to retreat, the galaxy might stand a chance at preserving the order that had held for centuries. The trap was simple in concept. A small, isolated moon, barely on any star maps, would serve as the battleground. The humans, with their penchant for sudden and unexpected moves, would be drawn in by the bait. The Alliance would create a false vulnerability. One ship appearing crippled, a false distress signal going out, all to give the appearance of weakness. The hope was that the humans, hungry for the upper hand, would take the bait and spring into action, not realizing that a coordinated fleet of hundreds would be waiting in ambush. At the heart of this plan was Admiral Theric, who now felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. The humans had taught them a bitter lesson. Precision and patience could topple the strongest military forces. This time, however, the Alliance would not be caught off guard. This time, they had the element of surprise. As the appointed day approached, the galaxy held its breath. Every leader, from the Tenthosians to the Kareth, prepared their fleets, tested their technologies, and waited for the humans to make their move. The air was thick with tension, but there was one thing none of them could shake. Despite all their preparations, no one felt truly certain of the outcome. Humanity had already defied every expectation. The odds were never in their favor, but somehow they had always found a way to turn the tables. At the moment the trap was set and the distress beacon activated, the humans did not take the bait as expected. There was no rush of human ships to capitalize on the vulnerability. Instead, there was nothing. Dead silence. A ripple of confusion spread across the coalition fleet. The distress signal was designed to lure the humans in, to provoke them into a mistake, but there was no sign of the enemy. Were they being cautious? Had the humans somehow seen through the deception? Were they biding their time, waiting for something else? Then, suddenly, the galaxy was thrown into chaos. A single human ship appeared on the far side of the moon. A ship unlike anything the Alliance had ever encountered. It was massive, a hulking beast of steel and energy, but its design was unfamiliar, even more advanced than the sleek warships they had seen before. It was surrounded by a dozen smaller ships, all moving in perfect synchrony, each one moving with the precision of a predator. Then came the transmission. "We've been watching you, all of you. Every move you make, every plan you devise. And you're all wrong." The voice was cold, unemotional, like a calm before a storm. The humans had not only anticipated the Alliance's plan, they had countered it even before the first shot was fired. What followed was a display of power so sudden, so overwhelming, that the Alliance could only watch in stunned silence. The massive human ship launched a burst of energy so powerful that it sliced through the heart of the closest battleship with one clean strike. There was no warning, no moment of hesitation. The ship crumpled as though it had been a piece of paper, and the explosion sent shockwaves through the fleet. Then, the smaller ships joined the assault, weaving through the Alliance fleet like ghosts in the night. Each move was precise, and each strike was deadly. The humans didn't rely on brute force. They focused on disabling key ships, cutting through the fleet's ranks with ease. Their technology was like nothing the Alliance had ever seen, far beyond anything even the most advanced races had managed to develop. The battle turned in an instant. The Alliance fleets, once so confident, were now nothing more than sitting targets. They had underestimated humanity once again, and now the consequences were becoming clear. Admiral Theric watched helplessly as his fleet was torn apart before his eyes. He had thought they had the upper hand, but humanity had shown that the real power was in their ability to predict, to act with an almost terrifying level of foresight. Their fleet was relentless, an unstoppable force, as though the human race had been waiting for this moment for centuries. "We are not here to negotiate," the voice from the human ship continued. "We are here to end what you started." The truth hit like a cold slap. Humanity wasn't just here to win. They were here to reshape the galaxy. The question now wasn't if the Alliance could win. It was whether they could survive the coming storm. The battle raged across the neutral moon, a battlefield now reduced to wreckage and fire. The Alliance fleet, once brimming with hope and unity, was now a broken shell, caught in the deadly dance of humanity's precision warfare. Ships that moments ago had stood proud and tall were now twisting debris in the dark void of space, their advanced weapons and shields torn apart like paper under the force of the human strike. Admiral Theric stood at the shattered command center of his flagship, staring at the chaos unfolding on the viewscreen. The human ships moved with terrifying speed, surgically disabling and dismantling the remaining fleet, leaving behind no room for hope. His own vessel, heavily damaged but still functional, was rapidly becoming a trap. He knew it was only a matter of time before the humans turned their attention to it. "Admiral, we need to retreat," an officer said, his voice filled with desperation. Theric's hand clenched into a fist. "We cannot retreat," he growled. "We must hold the line. If we flee now, it will be the end of us. The galaxy will fall." But deep inside, Theric knew the truth. There was no line left to hold. The humans had already won. What remained was not a question of battle tactics or military might, but survival. The very notion of their victory had evaporated like mist before a storm. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's resolve. And now, it was too late. The humans' lead ship, a massive behemoth with its sleek, imposing silhouette, came into full view of Theric's fleet. It hovered just beyond the destruction, waiting as though it had all the time in the universe. And then, the impossible happened. Rather than finishing off the remaining ships in the fleet, the human vessel shifted course and moved toward the planet below. Its engines flared to life, slowly, methodically, before it descended into the atmosphere. The Alliance had prepared for every conceivable form of retaliation from humanity, but this wasn't one of them. This was a new type of attack, a new type of engagement that none of the Alliance commanders had expected. "What are they doing?" Theric muttered, a chill creeping down his spine. The human fleet, now free of their enemies, had begun descending toward the surface of the moon. And soon, the large flagship landed gently on the planet's surface. In an instant, an eerie silence fell. The combat was over. The humans, it seemed, had no intention of continuing the war in space. A transmission crackled through the comm channels, this time directed at every species in the galaxy. "Citizens of the galaxy," the voice began, calm and resolute, "we are not here to destroy you. We are here to rebuild." The words echoed in the minds of every race. Rebuild. After all the destruction, all the devastation they had wrought, humanity's message was not one of victory, but of change. The Alliance and their forces had assumed that humanity's goal was to conquer and dominate, to impose their will. But this was something different. The voice continued. "Your governments, your empires, your wars, these are the chains that have bound your potential. It is not power that you need, but unity. The galaxy has long suffered from its own divisions, but we, humanity, have witnessed it, and we have seen your flaws. Now we offer you something different. We offer you the opportunity to join us in a new order, an order where you no longer live in fear, where resources are shared, where peace and progress are no longer just ideals, but realities." The transmission continued, detailing humanity's grand vision, an interconnected galaxy that thrived under a new shared banner. It wasn't imperialism or enslavement. It was something more insidious, evolution. Humanity was offering not just peace, but transformation. The galaxy had fought with humanity, struggling to preserve their own autonomy. But the humans now presented them with a different kind of future, one where every race could contribute to the advancement of all, one where endless war and hunger would be replaced with knowledge, mutual benefit, and power, a power that was not in conquering, but in understanding. The irony of it was too much to bear. The galaxy had feared humanity for its raw, overwhelming power. But now, they realized what they feared even more, that the humans were offering them something they might not be able to refuse. A chance to evolve, to change, or to be left behind in a universe that would no longer recognize their old ways. Theric stared, his mind racing. Could they accept this, or would they fight it, only to face another annihilation, not from force, but from the cold hand of progress? The human fleet was no longer just a threat. It was a beacon, and the galaxy had to decide if it would approach it with fear or with open arms. In the days that followed the human fleet's stunning transmission, the galaxy was plunged into uncertainty. The war was over, but the peace that humanity offered was anything but simple. A decision had to be made, one that would shape the future of every race, every civilization, across the stars. Admiral Theric, a man hardened by battle and loss, sat in silence aboard his damaged flagship. His once proud fleet was now nothing more than a handful of battered ships, survivors from a conflict that had ended in disaster. His mind raced, torn between the anger of his people, the desperation of his allies, and the dawning realization that perhaps the humans were offering something the galaxy had long forgotten: an opportunity to transcend. Across the galaxy, leaders from every race gathered in hastily arranged conferences, scrambling to find a unified response. On the surface, the proposal seemed like an impossible dream: an end to war, a future where resources were shared, and peace was not just a temporary state, but the foundation of a new order. But the deeper question lurked in every discussion. Was this humanity's gift, or their trap? Should we even consider it? Kalira, the fiery leader of the 10th Oceans, demanded, her sharp eyes glowing with suspicion. They've decimated our fleets, crippled our power, and now they offer us peace. After all the bloodshed, we would be fools to fall for this. The galaxy has always been divided, Admiral Theric replied, his voice measured but tinged with uncertainty. But have we ever asked ourselves what might be possible if we set aside our divisions, if we worked together for once? Look around. We fought them, and we lost. But perhaps we are not meant to fight them anymore. But what if they take over? Kalira retorted. What if this is just another form of control? Another empire, disguised as progress? We've all seen what they're capable of. We can't just hand over our sovereignty. Theric paused, the weight of his own experience pressing on him. What if this is different? He wondered. Humanity had fought with cunning, not out of a desire to dominate, but out of a vision for something better. And now, in the ashes of their victory, they were extending a hand. But could they trust them? On the other side of the galaxy, representatives from the Aethar and the Kereth huddled in their own councils. Both races had been devastated by humanity's precision strikes, and many within their ranks were still unwilling to consider any form of alliance. But even they could not ignore the looming truth. Humanity's advances, their ability to anticipate every move, spoke of something more than just military superiority. It spoke of a new kind of power, one that transcended old methods of conquest. We've fought endless wars. We've hoarded resources like scavengers on a dying planet, said John, the Aethar envoy, his voice deep and heavy with regret. Perhaps it is time for something different. Perhaps we've been wrong. But not everyone was ready to make that leap. The Kereth warlords, entrenched in their ancient traditions of conquest and pride, would never bow to what they saw as submission. They called for an immediate counterattack, one last attempt to reclaim their sovereignty from the humans. The war drums beat again, but they were the last throes of an old dying order. In the halls of power on the human flagship, the message remained clear and unwavering. Humanity was not here to rule. They were here to guide. The choice was not to be forced. It was to be earned. If you refuse, we will not retaliate. The calm, resolute voice of humanity's representative echoed across the galaxy. But we will not wait forever. The choice is yours. Continue the cycle of war, or take the first step toward a new beginning. The final message was sent, and then silence fell. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy faced a decision that wasn't driven by fear of annihilation or the greed for power. It was a choice between two paths, one of endless war, the other of uncertain peace. Admiral Theric stood before the viewscreen, the shattered remains of his fleet still in the background. He thought of the people who had fought for him, the countless lives lost in the name of a fractured order. Was this the end of his people's struggle, or the beginning of something entirely new? Across the galaxy, the leaders debated, fiercely, passionately, and with the weight of their histories on their shoulders. But the question remained the same. Could they trust humanity's vision, or would they risk everything to keep the old ways alive? The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and as the final transmission faded, one thing was clear: there would be no easy answers.